Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis, the second podcast and second deal of the day. Cipher Mining comes out with their earnings alongside a massive announcement with Amazon. We're going to be digging into that in today's podcast. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. Anthony absolutely loves it. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comments section below what you thought about earnings and this massive deal for Cipher. With that being said, let's get into today's podcast. All right, guys, away we go. Video number 2 of the day. We had to break these up. There was so much news, so much excitement in the space. Now, we covered the IREN deal to kick things off this morning. We're going to be going through the Cipher deal with AWS in today's presentation at a high level. We've got a third podcast coming out this afternoon talking about Hive news and comparing what we're starting to see in the CSP or colocation space. So this is an exciting day to say the least. Now, the miners themselves, share price wise, were absolutely off to the races. Cipher broke through $25 during early trading today. They have retreated a little bit. However, there is a lot of excitement, really regardless of what Bitcoin does now, for this space and for the amount of hyperscaler money that's flowing into this sector.
Yeah, absolutely. We've noticed that decoupling over the last sort of few weeks now. We remember where Bitcoin price got to its highs just about a month ago, $124,000 a coin. It's pulled back a lot, and we haven't seen that same pullback with the mining stocks. In fact, some of them have gone on to do really well, get to 52-week highs, and that's probably because of the fact now that the market's looking at these companies not really as Bitcoin mining companies, but as data center companies delivering the great returns or potential returns with the power that they've got. And remember, there's such a shortfall in power towards HPC AI that we're just really at the starting point.
Yeah, we certainly are. Now, we talk about hyperscaler attention in the space. We've now seen Google, Microsoft, AWS, CoreWeave, really a long lineup of A-list customers coming into this sector, whether they're looking for co-location deals, more of a vertically integrated GPU as a service approach like we've just seen with IREN, or really anything in the middle. We've seen a lot of creativity in terms of deal making. Today's announcement from Cipher, AWS, Tyler Page had committed to at least one deal within the calendar year. He's now delivered over and above.
He has a second deal, and we're only at the start of November, so we've still got another best part of 60 days to go for the rest of the year. Who knows what can happen? But today's deal really, got the markets moving. I mean, I think IREN may have got one-upmanship in terms of timing to get their deal announced in advance, and I don't know. I mean, Mike Alford was telling people last few weeks, there's going to be more deals announced, and there was, and we saw, the IREN deal announced first thing this morning, and then not too many hours later, we saw this deal come out, and it's an amazing contract when you look at it from a first point of view. 300 megawatts of gross capacity. Now, in my terminology, gross capacity includes the associated power to help deliver that compute IT. So I would suggest it's probably around the 200 megawatts of IT compute power with supporting power, and that gives it more of a PUE of about 1.45 to 1.48, which then gets you to 300 megawatts. The contract value itself, it's a 15-year base term lease, 5.5 billion is the estimated contract value, and that stacks up really well compared to some of the peers that we've seen out already. When you start looking at a 200 megawatt deal over 15 years, you can then start to compare with some of the other peer miners like Core Scientific. Their first deal was 200 megawatts with CoreWeave, so interesting to go through those numbers at some point in the next few days and do a little table to highlight. The lease date itself is going to start in August 2026. Now, obviously, these companies sign these leases, but there's a lot of work to do to refurbish sites and to deliver, buildings that can then be installed with the GPUs and make sure all the power's in place, the right conduits and all that, and everything else, the supporting rooms, the admin setup there, the logistical setup there. There's a lot of work to be done. It's not just about a shell. These are really expensive facilities to build. And, this is something that Cipher, who are renowned as a data center builder. I said this many times on the podcast over the last couple of years. You can look at all the peer miners out there, but a lot of them will say Cipher have delivered these types of high quality buildings before, and it won't be unexpected them to deliver these high quality tier 3 buildings for the likes of AWS and FluidStack.
Exciting times for Cipher Mining, to say the least. Now, that's not all they talked about in this deck. There was obviously earnings and a couple other nuggets in there, specifically the Colchis site. So this is potentially up to a 1 gigawatt facility. I'll pass it over to you. You can talk about kind of the location and this portfolio of sites.
Yeah, this Colchis site, going to be a joint venture, and Cipher expects to own about 95% now. It's sort of pending ERCOT approval, but the anticipated power consumption for this site will come in 2028. So this is unlikely to be part of the AWS agreement. If you look at what they've got already, they do have a small amount of capacity at Barber Lake. Remember, Barber Lake has 168 compute power with some ancillary power taken up to 244 megawatts in total. So at Barber Lake at the moment, there's 56 megawatts of spare capacity. Now, we do know Black Pearl has 300 megawatts in total already energized, of which 150 megawatts of that is used for Bitcoin mining. Now, I raised the question to Tyler at the HC Wainwright conference in New York, just September. And I said, if a deal was to come through that was big enough to suggest a really good rate of return for the power you were putting towards that deal, would you consider moving the mining machines that are already at Black Pearl site and utilizing the whole 300 megawatts of the facility? And his answer was, Anthony, you're very astute. Absolutely. So, we don't know for sure. We have reached out to the company and asked them to put some more clarification onto where this deal with AWS is going to take place. They do have a number of sites, but are not all in the sort of realms of being refurbished in the near future. But it does look like they have got the ability to do this. Might just have to move some of the mining equipment around there and then refurbish the Black Pearl site, because that's got 300 megawatts. And guess what? This contract is for 300 megawatts. It would tidy everything up in one nice little bow there, having Black Pearl as the AWS site in total. And then Barber Lake can be the FluidStack site with some extra capacity should that contract itself increase, like we've seen other peer miners increase theirs.
Boy, you're not kidding, Anthony. And if we start to look through this deck in a little bit more detail, you can see a number of slides talking about this future pipeline capacity. I recall another comment Tyler Page made in New York. He said, gentlemen, don't assume the people that found these initial sites quit working for Cipher or are not showing up for work anymore. They're coming in every single morning looking for more deals like this. Obviously, we just announced that massive potential 1 gigawatt Colchis site. But as you look down the list, Stingray and some of the future pipeline capacity, there is a lot under the hood at Cipher Mining.
There is, and you just mentioned Stingray itself. That's 100 megawatts of approved power capacity in an area of about 250 acres. And energization is expected there by the end of next year. So again, these timelines all being staggered there to allow for the deals to be put in place and then the refurbishment to start. And so, Stingray's 100 megawatts there. That's a great opportunity, but that's just the start of it. Their future pipeline capacity also includes 5 other sites. Revele, 70 megawatts, and bear in mind all these are sort of Texas located. Mikeska, 500 megawatts. Milsing, 500 megawatts. McLennan, 500 megawatts. These are some massive sites, and you just announced, obviously, the biggest one there, a 1,000 megawatt or a 1 gigawatt site at Colchis there in a total of 620 acres. It really looks like Cipher have started to really put their projects in a nice, neat order, and so they can sort of like start to benefit from these as each site becomes delivering. They can move on to the next site there, and revenues from the earlier sites can help start to fund some of the later sites, because we know for a fact that some of the deals here, the revenues for co-location appear to be really good, and we've seen that across the board in terms of all the peer miners. But I quite like the deal today. Obviously, I'll look at him in a bit more depth when I've got some capacity this week and do a little comparison with some of the other miners there on a sort of like megawatt basis, because that's the lowest common denominator where you can compare deals. And it will be interesting. Now, the revenues for these deals is one thing, and we know all about the revenues for all these deals. The second part of it is how to control the costs associated with these deals here. So, we know that Cipher, with many of their facilities in Texas, operate at some of the lowest power costs. Now, power isn't as much a driver in terms of HPC, it is for Bitcoin mining, because the cost of power in HPC is a very small percentage, where in Bitcoin mining, it can be as high as 50 or 60%. And that's even if you have a good rate of power. But by still having a lower rate of power in some of these sites here, it just means extra margin. But then you have the sort of like the operating costs. It's a case of you're paying staff. Are you paying, a great team to be remaining in the company? You're also giving things like rewards in terms of bonuses, in terms of stock compensation. So those are the areas that are within the company's remit, and their costs that they can control there. So looking at the power is one thing, but until you start seeing the costs associated with these contracts in terms of, how much margin they're going to deliver, that's going to be the tricky one. We won't sort of see that information until they start delivering, revenues in their earnings update. And we've just started to see now the likes of Core Scientific in their last quarter results had, $15 million. That was part of the CoreWeave deal starting to feature, and that will start ramping up quarter by quarter. And by the end of next year, you'll start to see most of that 590 megawatts being received in revenues. We're still at the earlier stage with some of these other miners, because they've just signed deals and they literally have to start refurbishment now. And that can take, the best part of a year to 18 months to even start receiving revenues. So we're looking at August next year for Cipher to start receiving some of the money from this particular deal, but it'll only be the start. It won't be delivering everything in one go.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up this staggered approach, and it really gives the opportunity to these companies to build out the sales pipeline, the operations, the contracts all in unison there. Almost reminds me of what we've seen now with TeraWulf. Cipher seems to have the system pretty much down pat, and now it's kind of rinse and repeat. You start to talk about the revenue mix and the revenue opportunities here. If we jump into the Q3 results, you can see they put a nice little pie chart, a pro forma growth mix based on megawatts. So this is not revenue, but obviously closely related. Interesting to me, we talked about the tone really shifting in the Riot and the Bitfarms deck away from Bitcoin mining. You can see on paper, megawatt wise, these companies have really shifted their focus in a big way as well.
Yeah, they have, and they've now realised. It took a few of them longer to realise, but IREN were one of the early starters in this space, along with Hive Digital, along with Bit Digital. Remember, we talked about those three companies for the best part of the last 2 years in terms of delivering, a HPC strategy already and already receiving revenues. Now we're starting to see the rewards from those, with the likes of IREN announcing a big deal this morning. And, Cipher also really sort of anticipating the change quicker than other miners there, have got 2 deals in place really quickly. And I don't think it'll be too long before we see, more deals being signed, and maybe more deals being signed by Cipher in the near future.
Just incredible amount of news flow today. Now, I know Cipher also put out their earnings. I'll pass it back to you for a thought on that in a second. But if you guys would like some additional information on miners like Cipher, for example, we've got an individual miner page for each one of them on the website, powermininganalysis.com. You've also got some of your nice little data, tables, charts, analytics on there as well, live miner margin, miner production results, and we're currently working on some megawatt comparisons as well. Now, in terms of earnings, when are we going to discuss those?
Well, we can go through the high level now, Bryce, and it really is high level. I don't want to spend too much detail because these numbers only came out today, and it'll take us a day or so to go through them. But from a high level perspective, we can turn around and look at what Cipher have done over the last quarter. And in terms of hash rate, that's increased by 40%. They're now operating at 23.6 exahash. Now, we still need that confirmation as to whether the Black Pearl site will be used for this total deal with AWS, or whether they'll still maintain a significant amount of their Bitcoin mining there. But 23.6 exahash is their total at the moment. I don't see them increasing that now they've got these two deals in place, because they'll be starting to really ramp those up there. In terms of Bitcoin mined, again, there was a nice increase, but obviously when you increase the hash rate by 40%, you'd expect the Bitcoin mined. That increased by 35%, so 689 Bitcoin was mined. They still add Bitcoin to their hodl, so they have been growing their hodl throughout the quarter. Their all-in electricity cost has increased. Now, Cipher has predominantly been one of the cheapest miners in terms of power cost. When we look at some of the power costs they've been driving, it's been as low as 2.7 cents. Now, that doesn't mean 2.7 cents at every site. That's been at the Odessa site. They've managed to enable, really low power costs there. Now, at other sites, it's actually more expensive. So what Cipher have been doing, unlike peer miners, is they've really been switching off when the power gets anywhere much north of 2.7 cents. So they want to try and maintain a lower power cost. Now that impacts your production, because you could be curtailing significantly more time. And that's the strategy they've used there. And it has worked out for them. In terms of revenues increased by 65% to 72 million. They did make an overall loss of $3 million. They did actually benefit from an increased value in the warrants on the balance sheet of about $30 million. So that helped them out there. And in terms of the adjusted EBITDA, which is a non-GAAP earnings metric, 41 million as opposed to 30 million in the previous quarter. So there's a 34% increase there. Now, having just raised that big 1.2 billion in terms of the convertible note, which are due to be completed in 2031, that 1.2 billion is showing us cash and cash equivalents on their balance sheet as well. So they've got plenty of cash to move forward through now to start delivering some of these refurbishments required by both the Fluidstack deal and the AWS deal. But I'm sure now with this second deal in place now, there'll be emphasis now on trying to raise more money, and they'll have a number of levers. I mean, when you get the likes of AWS come knocking on the door, it's going to open more doors for you to raise capital, and raise capital very, very quickly at figures that the shareholders might appreciate, which will be fairly low.
I was going to say probably around 0%. Yeah, we appreciate the high level overview, and you guys will be sure to put that in a comparative table, run it alongside some of the other miners as we see those earnings results come out. Keep in mind, we've got 7 CEO earnings interviews lined up on the channel here. So take a quick look again on the website in the calendar section. You can see not only earnings dates, but also our earnings interview dates as well. Thanks for the update, guys. Let us know if you're holding Cipher in the comment section below. Hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here shortly.